Welcome to Sleepy Tales, a place where myths, legends and timeless fairy tales are told slowly and softly to help you gently fall asleep. Before we begin, I'd love for you to share where you're from and what time it is where you are. It's always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. And if you enjoy relaxing stories, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a night of our peaceful tales. Now settle in, relax, and drift off to tonight's bedtime story. Most people know The Little Mermaid as a bright story of love and adventure beneath the sea, but the original tale was something far deeper. Long before it became the version we know today, Hans Christian Andersen wrote of a mermaid whose dreams reached beyond the ocean itself. Her story is not just about a prince or a kingdom under the waves. It is about courage, longing, and the mysterious path between the sea and the soul. Beneath the shimmering surface lies a tale of beauty, wonder, and the quiet strength of a heart that dares to dream beyond its world. Far below the surface of the sea, where sunlight can no longer reach and the water grows as dark as midnight, there lies a kingdom unlike any in the world above. Its walls are made of coral that glows faintly in the deep, and its towers rise like pale trees toward the ceiling of the ocean. Pearls as large as raindrops shimmer in the sand, and the light of strange fish drifts through the water like falling stars. Here lives the Sea King, ruler of all the ocean and father to 6 daughters, each born of the sea and shaped by its silence. The Sea King himself is a wise ruler, though quiet and distant, his heart more at peace among the slow-moving tides than with matters of human concern. It is his mother, the old Sea Queen, who watches over his household. She is proud and loving in her own stern way, keeping order in the coral palace and caring for her granddaughters with a gentleness that only sometimes hides behind her sharp words. The 6 young mermaids live under her care, their laughter filling the great halls like the soft ringing of shells in the current. Each of them is beautiful, yet none are alike. The eldest is graceful and strong, with long dark hair like deep water. The second loves the creatures of the sea and gathers flowers from the ocean floor. The third sings songs so clear that even the fish pause to listen. The fourth delights in pearls and treasures lost by shipwrecked sailors, and the fifth spends her days exploring the ruins of sunken ships. But it is the youngest who is the quietest of them all. Her hair is as pale as sea foam, her eyes as clear as the shallow tide, and her heart more curious than the rest. She listens more than she speaks, and when her sisters laugh and chase one another through the gardens of coral, she stays behind, gazing upward where the water turns lighter. For though she has never seen the world above, she feels its pull as if it calls to her from the surface. She asks her grandmother endless questions about the humans, what they look like, how they live, and what it feels like to walk on land. The old queen tells her stories of shining stars, green forests, and creatures who breathe air instead of water. She explains that above the sea there is a world filled with beauty and danger, a world where people live brief lives, yet carry something no mermaid possesses, an immortal soul that continues even after death. The little mermaid listens with wide eyes, her heart stirring at the thought of a sky without end. The mermaids are not allowed to visit the surface until they turn 15. It's an old rule, meant to protect them from the unknown. The eldest sister reaches that age first, and with great excitement, she swims upward through the dark water until she breaks the surface. When she returns, she tells her sisters everything she has seen: the pale moon rising over the ocean, the ships that glide across the waves, and the humans who walk upon decks of wood beneath fluttering sails. She tells of lights that burn brighter than the stars, and of music that drifts faintly across the water. Each year, another sister reaches her 15th birthday and rises to the surface, returning with new wonders to share. One has seen the setting sun scatter colours like fire across the clouds. Another has floated near the shore, hearing the laughter of children playing in the sand. One sister swam so close to a harbour that she heard bells ringing from a distant church tower. The Little Mermaid listens to every word, her imagination painting pictures of a world she has never touched. Sometimes she swims up as far as she dares, standing beneath the layer of water where the light is still dim but the sea begins to glow blue. She looks upward, trying to see the ships her sisters describe, but they are always too far above. Only the shadow of the surface greets her, the thin barrier between her world and theirs. Still, she feels something alive in her chest each time she looks. It is a longing she cannot explain, something like the ache of an unanswered song. When she's alone, she tends to her small garden of red and blue flowers growing from coral shaped like the sun. In the very centre of her garden stands a marble statue of a boy, a remnant from a shipwreck long ago. The statue has gentle eyes and a kind face, and though it is only stone, the Little Mermaid feels drawn to it. She often imagines that he lives in the world above, breathing air and walking among the trees her grandmother spoke of. Sometimes she even imagines him looking up at the same moon that glows faintly through the waves. As time passes, she begins to dream more often of the world beyond the sea. Her sisters tease her softly, saying that she thinks too much, and should enjoy her home instead of longing for what she cannot have. But she cannot help herself. The sea, though endless, feels small compared to what she imagines above. The old queen notices her wandering gaze and warns her gently that curiosity can be both a gift and a burden. Yet the Little Mermaid only smiles, her heart still set upon the light she has never seen. Finally, the long-awaited day draws near, her 15th birthday. The night before, she cannot sleep. The ocean feels too still, the coral gardens too quiet. She swims slowly through the palace, past her sister's chambers and the sleeping sea creatures curled in shells. She looks upward once more, where the faint shimmer of the surface trembles in the distance like a veil. Tomorrow, that world will no longer be forbidden. Tomorrow, she will see for herself all that she has dreamed of. Her grandmother helps her prepare, adorning her long hair with pearls and smoothing the scales that shimmer across her tail. "You are ready," the old queen says softly, though there is a hint of sadness in her voice. The Little Mermaid nods, feeling both excitement and fear. What if the world above is not as beautiful as she has imagined? Or worse, what if it is even more beautiful, and she cannot bear to leave it behind? When at last the morning comes, she rises through the water. The sea grows brighter the higher she swims, the light deepening from green to blue, then from blue to silver. The pressure of the deep loosens its hold, and a new kind of stillness surrounds her. She feels the warmth of the sun long before she breaks through, a gentle heat brushing against her face. Then, in a burst of bubbles and light, she reaches the surface. For the first time in her life, she sees the sky. It stretches endlessly above her, pale and golden, filled with drifting clouds. The air feels different, thin, alive, and strange. Around her, the sea sparkles with sunlight, and far in the distance, she sees the shape of a great ship moving slowly across the waves. Its white sails billow in the wind, and music carries faintly through the air. Her heart beats faster. Humans, they are real. The ship gleams with lanterns and laughter, and though she is still far away, she can see people moving upon its decks. She swims closer, careful not to be seen, her eyes fixed on a young man standing near the railing. His face glows in the light of the setting sun, and the little mermaid feels something stir deep within her. Something she does not yet understand. The ship sails on, and the waves roll gently around her. Above, the world she has longed for stretches out in every direction, vast, bright, and full of promise. The sea behind her feels heavier now, and though she belongs to it, part of her heart is already drifting toward the world above. And so begins the little mermaid's journey toward the surface. A journey that will soon draw her closer to the prince, to the land of humans, and to the choice that will change her life forever. The first time the little mermaid broke the surface, the sunlight startled her like a new melody. The world above the sea was vast and bright, filled with colours and shapes she had only imagined in her quiet moments among the coral gardens. The sky stretched endlessly, a pale canvas where clouds drifted lazily, glowing with the promise of warmth. The air felt strange on her skin, light and sharp, carrying scents she had never known. Salt from the sea, the faint sweetness of flowers growing on distant land, and smoke from human fires. Far across the water, she noticed a ship, enormous and gleaming, floating like a jewel on the waves. Its sails were white and stretched wide against the wind. Lanterns hung from its masts, glowing gold in the waning sunlight. Music and laughter floated across the distance, mingling with the wind and sea spray. She could see people moving on deck, dressed in fine clothing, faces bright with joy. Her eyes were drawn to a young man standing near the rail, his hair dark and blowing with the breeze, his expression filled with both curiosity and a gentle calm. The little mermaid had never seen such a face, nor felt such a strange flutter in her chest. She lingered above the water, drifting close enough to hear fragments of laughter, though the words were unclear. The prince moved across the deck with a grace that seemed natural, and the little mermaid imagined him stepping on land, among the trees and flowers her grandmother had described. Her heart pulled toward him, though she knew nothing of love as humans understand it. It was an instinct, a longing that drew her to his presence. But the serenity of the evening did not last. A storm rose quickly, dark clouds gathering on the horizon. The wind howled, bending the mast of the ship, and waves grew taller than the tallest towers of her sea kingdom. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the terror on the deck as sailors shouted to one another, The Little Mermaid watched in horror as the waves smashed against the hull. The ship pitched violently, throwing people into the sea, and she saw the prince swept from the deck, struggling in the water. Without thinking, she dove into the churning waves. The water above had seemed gentle, almost welcoming, but the storm-tossed sea was relentless. Her strong tail cut through the currents, her arms breaking the surface to push the prince towards safety. The cold struck her like knives, her lungs burning, but she would not stop. Finally, with all her strength, she dragged him to a quiet cove near the shore. His body was heavy, and he lay still in her arms, as if the waves had drained him of life. The Little Mermaid stayed by him, watching for signs of awakening. The sea had calmed slightly now, leaving only the whisper of waves on sand and the distant crash of surf. From the forest above, she could hear the rustle of leaves as someone approached. A young woman from a nearby temple had come down to the beach. The Little Mermaid remained hidden, submerged in the shallow water, her eyes fixed on the prince, as the woman discovered him and carried him to safety. She followed silently, moving through the shallows, her body unseen beneath the water. The prince lay on the sand, the warmth of the sun beginning to return to him. Slowly he opened his eyes, blinking against the brightness, and his gaze fell upon the temple girl. A faint smile appeared on his lips, and the Little Mermaid's heart trembled at the sight. She had saved him, yet he would never know. He reached toward the girl, as if seeking her hand, speaking words that only she could hear. The Little Mermaid watched in silence, the weight of her helplessness pressing upon her chest. For hours she stayed, hidden, observing the humans. The prince awoke fully, sat upright, and looked around, confused, yet calm. The temple girl tended to him, brushing sand from his hair and adjusting his clothing. He smiled at her with a gentle gratitude, not knowing the mermaid's role in his survival. The Little Mermaid's heart ached with a strange mix of joy and sorrow. She had acted to save him, yet she was invisible in his eyes, a shadow unnoticed. As the day wore on, the prince and the temple girl walked slowly back toward the temple, leaving the mermaid alone by the edge of the sea. She sank beneath the waves, exhausted but unable to rest, her mind replaying the events over and over. She had glimpsed the world above, seen the sunlight and the land, and felt the warmth of the air. But she had also discovered the distance between her life in the sea and the life of humans. The prince, whom she had already begun to think of with wonder, belonged to a world she could only observe. The Little Mermaid returned to the deeper waters of her kingdom, swimming slowly through the quiet of the ocean. The coral walls of the palace seemed different now, familiar but smaller, limited. She passed the gardens of her sisters, the pearls and shells she had always admired, yet her thoughts were far above where the prince had smiled at another. She had tasted the surface, felt the air on her skin, and now the ocean, though comforting, seemed like a place of waiting rather than living. The mermaid spent her days wandering the coral halls and the sea gardens, but her mind was elsewhere. She listened to the stories of her older sisters, who had also seen the surface, comparing their tales to what she had witnessed firsthand. She realized that the human world was not merely a place of beauty, but also of complexities she could not yet understand. Her heart was caught between two worlds, the one she had always known, and the one she had glimpsed in the storm-tossed sunlight. Night fell, and the sea glowed faintly under the light of the moon. The little mermaid drifted to a quiet corner of her garden, staring upward through the water at the silver reflection above. She thought of the prince, of his warmth and his smile, and a longing she had never known filled her chest. She wished she could speak to him, could tell him of the hours she had spent saving him from the waves, could be more than a shadow in the ocean. Yet she remained silent, her secret known only to herself and the shifting currents around her. Days passed, and she returned again and again to the cove where she had rescued him, hoping to catch another glimpse of the world above. Sometimes she saw the distant sails of ships, men and women moving across their decks, music and laughter carried faintly on the wind. Each time her heart beat faster. Her longing deepened. She began to understand that the world above was alive in a way the ocean could never be, filled with motion, sound, and lives that moved on a rhythm different from her own. Though the mermaid remained in her kingdom, the memory of the prince stayed with her, mingling with the colours of coral and the shimmer of sunlight through water. She could not speak to him, could not reveal herself. Yet she felt her heart stretching toward him as if it had always belonged partly to the surface. In the quiet of the deep sea, she began to dream not only of humans and the sun, but of herself in that world, walking and moving with the grace she had glimpsed in the prince's presence. And so her days passed in a mixture of wonder and longing, each movement through the coral gardens reminding her of what lay above, each glance toward the surface keeping the memory of the storm and the prince alive. She had seen the human world, touched its edges, and saved a life within it. Yet she was still a mermaid, bound to the sea, and the ocean's depths called her back, reminding her of all she had yet to learn, all she had yet to choose. The little mermaid couldn't forget the prince, and though she remained unseen and unheard, she carried his image in her heart as she swam through the quiet beauty of her kingdom. The world above had opened before her, filled with wonder, and she felt the pull of it like a current she could not resist. Her journey was only beginning, for she would soon face a choice that could lead her closer to the surface, closer to the prince, and closer to the life she had imagined. A life that demanded courage, sacrifice, and the daring to leave the familiar behind. The ocean around her was calm now, but the memory of the storm lingered like a shadow. The little mermaid understood that the surface world was both fragile and alive, full of light and danger. And as she drifted toward her palace, the first spark of determination touched her heart. A determination that would carry her to the sea witch, to choices she could never have imagined, and to a path that would change everything she had known. The little mermaid returned to the quiet depths of her palace with a heart heavy and restless. Though the coral walls and shimmering gardens of her home were as familiar and comforting as always, they could not soothe the longing that had taken root in her soul. Her thoughts remained with the world above, with the sunlight that had brushed her skin, and the prince whose face lingered like a shadow she could neither chase nor escape. The laughter of her sisters and the gentle care of her grandmother reached her ears, but she heard them as one hears a distant song through water, present yet unreachable. As the days passed, the mermaid's yearning grew sharper, twisting like a current around her heart. She asked her grandmother about humans again, hoping for some knowledge that might ease the ache. The old queen spoke with a seriousness that made the water seem heavier around them. She explained that humans possess immortal souls, gifts that endure beyond their mortal lives. Mermaids, on the other hand, live in a way that is beautiful and free but fleeting. When their lives end, they dissolve into foam on the surface of the sea. Their bodies vanish, their spirits return to the tides, but they do not carry the promise of life beyond their mortal years. The little mermaid listened in silence, the weight of the words sinking into her heart. She imagined herself in the world above, not merely as a visitor, but as someone who could live fully, walking on land and breathing air, experiencing sunlight and wind as humans do. She imagined the prince, and a thought formed so sharply it almost hurt. If she could not gain an immortal soul, even a chance at life beyond the ocean, she could never be truly part of his world. And yet, she could not ignore the love she felt. A tender, unformed love, born of fascination, awe, and the longing to belong. The mermaid knew then that she must act. Her desire for the human world and her love for the prince would not allow her to remain in the safety of her palace, no matter how peaceful the water might be. She swam through the gardens, past her sisters, past the walls that glimmered faintly with the light of pearls, and into the dark reaches of the ocean where few dared to go. There, in the shadows of sunken ships and ancient rocks, lived the sea witch, a being whispered of in fear and awe, whose power over the deep was unmatched. The stories told by older mermaids spoke of her craft, her dark bargains, and the terrible prices she demanded for her favours. The little mermaid approached the sea witch's lair with a mixture of fear and determination. The water grew colder, heavier, and darker as she neared the cave where the witch dwelled. Strange shapes loomed in the gloom. Coral twisted into eerie forms. Seaweed moved as if alive, and the shells of long-dead creatures rattled faintly on the sandy floor. The witch appeared before her without sound, emerging from the shadows with eyes that gleamed like polished stones. Her hair floated around her like black smoke, and her presence filled the cave with a sense of danger and inevitability. The little mermaid spoke, her voice trembling at first, though the words were not of music but of hope and longing. She told the sea witch of the world above, of the prince, and of the dreams that had taken hold of her heart. She asked, in quiet desperation, if there were a way for her to walk among humans, to gain a body like theirs, and the chance to live on land. The sea witch listened, her expression unreadable, her eyes never leaving the mermaid's pale face. Then, slowly she nodded. "Yes," the sea witch said, her voice like the scraping of shells across stone. "I can give you legs, but nothing comes without a price. You will give me your voice, the sound of your singing, the beauty of your music. It will be gone forever, and no human will hear it. Every step you take will be like walking upon sharp knives, and the pain will cut through you with each movement. If you fail to win the prince's love, and marry him, if he chooses another..." You will die at dawn, and your body will dissolve into foam, leaving nothing behind. The little mermaid listened to the terms, feeling the weight of each word press down on her chest. Her mind turned over the consequences, imagining the silence that would replace her voice, imagining the searing pain of each step on human legs, imagining the terror of fading into foam at dawn. Yet with each fear, another feeling rose, the determination that had driven her here, the longing for a life beyond the waves, the hope that she might touch the world above in some lasting way. After a long pause, she nodded, silently accepting the witch's terms. The sea witch smiled faintly, a curl of shadow that held both approval and amusement. She mixed her dark potions and strange powders, chanting in a language older than the tides. The little mermaid drank the potion, and immediately the ocean seemed to shift around her. Pain shot through her body as her tail split apart, scales tearing away to reveal human legs. The sensation was unbearable, like walking on knives as the witch had promised. But the little mermaid gritted her teeth and endured it, holding her hope tightly in her heart. When the transformation was complete, she felt the absence of her voice first. The music that had once filled the water with beauty and melody was gone. Her throat was silent, her songs trapped forever beneath the waves. She took her first step on the sand near the cave's edge, and pain cut through her as though the shore itself resented her presence. Yet she stood upright, trembling but alive, a new being in a world she had longed to touch. The sea witch's shadow lingered as she handed the mermaid a final warning. "Remember, child of the sea," she said, "you have made your choice. The prince may never love you, and if he does not, the dawn will claim you. Only courage, patience, and faith will carry you through the days to come. Choose wisely, act boldly, and even then, the path will not be easy." The little mermaid left the cave, stepping carefully along the sandy shore. Her legs were strange and weak, and every motion brought fresh pain. Yet with each step she felt close to the world she had longed for. The sky above seemed brighter than ever, the air alive with motion, and in the distance the sound of the sea and wind mingled with music she could not hear but imagined. She thought of the prince, of the warmth she had seen in his eyes, and she knew that whatever lay ahead, she had embarked upon a journey from which there could be no return. As she made her way toward the distant land, she paused occasionally to look back at the sea that had been her home. It stretched endlessly, shimmering under sunlight, its currents gentle yet relentless. She loved it still, but her heart pulled her upward, toward the prince, toward the human world, toward the life she had chosen despite its dangers. Each step was a mixture of agony and exhilaration, each moment a test of her resolve, yet she could not turn back. And so, the little mermaid walked toward the shore where the prince had once been saved, toward the land that had first filled her dreams, toward a future uncertain yet full of promise. She did not yet know if the prince would ever love her, if the world above would accept her, or if she could endure the price she had paid. But in her heart, she carried the hope that had brought her to the sea witch, a hope that even in silence and pain could light the path ahead. The ocean behind her whispered, a quiet reminder of what she had left and what she still belonged to. The sun above glimmered faintly through the morning mist, and the world of humans waited just beyond the waves. The Little Mermaid's journey had begun in earnest, and each painful step brought her closer to the prince, to the kingdom of land, and to a choice that would shape her life in ways she had only dared to imagine. Her legs ached with the strange sharpness of every movement, yet her spirit remained steadfast. She knew she must move forward, through forests, along beaches, and eventually to the palace where the prince dwelled. And though she could not speak, though every step brought agony, she carried in her heart the memory of the waves, the sunlight, and the eyes of the young prince, a memory that would guide her through the trials to come. The Little Mermaid had paid a terrible price to walk among humans, and yet the world above seemed brighter, fuller, and more alive than anything she had known. She would endure the pain, embrace the silence, and follow her longing wherever it led. Toward the prince, toward the human world, and toward the choices that awaited her beyond the horizon of the sea. The first moments on land were agony for the Little Mermaid, though the sharp pain of her new legs didn't erase the wonder of the world she had stepped into. Each movement cut like knives through her soft skin, and each breath felt strange, as though the air itself resisted her presence. Yet the sight of the shore, bright under the sun, called her forward. She crawled, stumbled, and finally took trembling steps along the sand, the grains sticking to her wet skin, as though welcoming her to this new realm. The waves whispered behind her, lapping against the rocks in gentle encouragement, and the distant sun sparkled across the water as if guiding her way. It was not long before the prince appeared. He had been walking along the beach, drawn by a strange sense that something near the cove was not quite as it should be. His eyes, sharp and alert, fell upon her as she struggled to stand, and he moved quickly to help. The Little Mermaid could not speak, could not explain the hours she had spent saving him from the storm, but he saw the devotion in her gaze, the silent grace in her movements. His hands steadied her as she rose, supporting her wobbling legs. Though she could not thank him with words, her expression, her gentle eyes, and the quiet way she moved spoke in a language older than speech. The prince brought her to his palace, a grand place of stone and gardens, filled with corridors that echoed with music and the scent of flowers. There she became his companion, walking silently at his side, attending to his needs in ways that did not require voice. He watched her carefully, sensing her devotion and the strange beauty that clung to her in every gesture. She moved with a grace unfamiliar to those born on land, and though he did not yet understand the depth of her feelings, he could not help but be drawn to her. Her presence became a comfort, a gentle rhythm in the palace that he came to depend upon. The Little Mermaid learned quickly how to navigate this new world. She studied the palace's halls, the furniture, the rooms, the gardens, and the people who moved within them. Every step remained painful, yet each one also brought her closer to the prince, closer to the life she had dreamed of. She observed him constantly, memorizing his habits, his smiles, the way his eyes lingered on the distant horizon, and the faint light that appeared when he spoke with those he cared for. Though she could not answer him with words, her silent attention became a presence he valued deeply, a reminder of comfort and steadiness in a world that often felt tumultuous. The prince, for his part, felt affection for the mermaid, though he did not realize the depths of her sacrifice. He had never met anyone like her, quiet yet attentive, delicate yet resilient. His heart warmed to her in the way one's heart warms to a friend who is always near, who understands without needing explanation. He smiled more often in her presence, rested more easily, and felt a calm he did not find elsewhere. Yet the memory of the temple girl, the one who had tended to him after the storm, lingered in his mind. He spoke often of her, describing her beauty and kindness, unaware that it was the Little Mermaid who had truly saved him. Days and weeks passed, and the palace became a space where the mermaid moved gracefully yet silently, her every action observed by the prince. He came to depend on her not as a servant, but as a companion, a silent shadow whose presence was comforting and familiar. She followed him through gardens where fountains played and marble statues gleamed in the sun. She walked beside him along corridors lined with tapestries depicting distant lands, each step still bringing sharp pain, but also the thrill of being near him, of moving in a world she had longed for. Despite her devotion, a quiet sorrow grew in her heart. The prince's gaze often turned toward the distant past, toward the temple girl who had helped him, and she understood that she could never replace that memory. She tried to speak with him, to bridge the gap with words, but her voice was gone, stolen by the sea witch's bargain. She could only offer gestures, gentle touches, and the silent grace of her movements. And yet, despite the silence, she felt a strange closeness to him, a connection that transcended words, fragile but real. One morning, news arrived that the prince's father had arranged a marriage for him with a princess from a distant land. The mermaid's heart quivered as she learned the details, the words striking her like waves against rocks. She knew, without hearing him speak, that the prince would feel joy at the arrangement, though she also sensed the tension in his heart, the memory of the temple girl lingering quietly. The palace buzzed with preparations. Fabrics were measured, jewels polished, and feasts planned. The Little Mermaid moved among the preparations, her pain and longing silent companions to the activity around her. The day she discovered that the princess to whom the prince was promised was the very same temple girl who had cared for him after the storm, her heart felt a pang too sharp to bear. Every smile the prince gave her, every laugh and gentle glance, became both a blessing and a reminder of her impossible situation. She watched him, her silent presence at his side, while he spoke eagerly of the upcoming wedding, his eyes shining with excitement. He remained unaware of the Little Mermaid's role in his survival, of the nights she had spent longing for him, or the silent sacrifices she had made to walk on land. Though the pain of her legs had dulled with practice, every step carried the sting of her bargain, reminding her that the choice she had made was not reversible. She endured it silently, moving through the palace as if part of its structure, her devotion unseen yet undeniable. She learned to anticipate the prince's needs before he spoke, to arrange flowers where he would notice them, to offer gestures of comfort when he seemed burdened. Every act of care was a word she could not speak, a song she could not sing, yet it was her language of love, delicate and enduring. The prince, in turn, grew to depend on her presence more than he realized. He would not have described his feelings as love, for the memory of the temple girl still occupied his thoughts. But he valued the Little Mermaid in ways that went beyond friendship. He sensed her attentiveness, her quiet devotion, and the way she moved through the palace with a grace that seemed almost otherworldly. In moments of fatigue or uncertainty, he would pause to watch her, feeling a subtle reassurance in her calm presence. The Little Mermaid, despite the quiet ache in her heart, found solace in the small ways she could influence the world around him. She arranged flowers, tended to objects he valued, and anticipated his moods, all without uttering a single word. Her silence became a comfort, her presence a constant in a life that was otherwise filled with expectation and ceremony. And though she could not claim his heart in the way she longed to, she carried within her a hope that one day he might notice the depth of her devotion, the sacrifices she had made, and the love she carried silently in every step and every gesture. And so the days passed, with the Little Mermaid walking beside the prince through gardens, halls and courtyards, enduring the sharp pain of her legs and the absence of her voice. She observed him carefully, memorizing every smile, every glance, every expression of joy or sorrow. She learned the rhythms of his life, the patterns of his thoughts and habits, and the small ways she could ease his burdens. Though she remained unseen in the deepest sense, a silent companion, her presence shaped the world around her as surely as the tides shaped the shore. The preparations for the wedding continued, and the prince's excitement grew with each passing day. The Little Mermaid watched, her heart both tender and heavy, as he spoke eagerly of the princess and their future together. She understood that he remained unaware of her sacrifice, and that the life he imagined with the temple girl was built upon a memory that did not include her. Yet she stayed at his side, silent but steadfast, each painful step a testament to her courage, her devotion, and the hope that she might, in some unseen way, touch his life. Though the path ahead was uncertain, the Little Mermaid had crossed the boundary from sea to land, endured the price of her transformation, and remained close to the prince she loved. Her journey was far from complete. Ahead lay choices and trials that she could not yet foresee, moments that would test the limits of her patience, courage, and the depth of her devotion. She moved forward with silent resolve, guided by the memory of the sea, the sunlight, and the warmth of the prince's presence, stepping carefully along a path that would lead to consequences she had only begun to imagine. The night was quiet but tense, the palace alive with the anticipation of the wedding. The Little Mermaid moved silently through the shadows, her legs aching from the hours of standing and walking, each step a reminder of the sea witch's cruel bargain. The prince, radiant in his attire, laughed softly with the princess, unaware of the presence at his side who had saved his life and silently devoted herself to him for so long. The air above was still, the moonlight casting gentle silver patterns across the courtyard, reflecting the calm surface of the ocean in the distance. From beneath the waves, her sisters emerged, their forms glimmering in the moonlight. Each carried a small, sharp dagger, given to them by the sea witch herself, the edge polished to a cruel perfection. They swam swiftly, breaking the surface just beyond the shore, and then moved toward her, their eyes filled with both hope and sorrow. They did not speak. Words were unnecessary. The sea witch's conditions were clear, and they had brought her the instrument of her choice. The dagger lay heavy in her hand, its cold steel biting into her palm, as if it already knew the weight of the choice it demanded. Her sisters whispered only through gestures, urging her to act. If she could strike the prince before the sun rose, and if his blood touched her feet, she could return to the sea. Her voice restored, her tail regained. She could live again among the coral gardens, swim through the vast depths of her kingdom, and return to the life she had once known. The temptation was overwhelming, a life reclaimed in a single act. Yet it came at a cost she could not bear to pay. The little mermaid approached the prince, her eyes taking in the gentle contours of his face, the warmth in his smile, and the ease with which he moved among the guests. She imagined the weight of the dagger in her hand, the act of harming the one she had loved above all else. The thought struck her with a force stronger than any pain she had felt from the sea or the sharpness of her legs. She could not bring herself to pierce his heart, to extinguish the life that had become so precious to her, even if it meant losing her own future. The first light of dawn began to brush the horizon, painting the sky with pale pinks and golds, and the little mermaid felt time slipping away. Her sisters, glimmering like stars against the darkness, urged her silently to decide. Yet she remained motionless, the dagger in her hand trembling. The prince laughed lightly at something the princess had said, completely unaware of the decision being demanded by the tide, the night, and the sea witch's cruel bargain. He was alive, unknowing, and in that moment she realized that her love could not come at the cost of his life. With a deep, unspoken resolve, she released the dagger. The steel slipped from her fingers and tumbled through the air, striking the waves below with a faint splash. Her sisters watched in quiet sorrow as the dagger vanished beneath the surf, a chance lost, but a choice honoured. The little mermaid turned toward the sea, feeling the pull of the water, the rhythm of the tides calling her back. She leaped, her body slicing through the air, and plunged into the waves with the morning light warming her face. The cold of the water enveloped her, yet the familiar sensation of dissolving into the foam did not come. Instead, she felt herself lifted, lighter than air, rising above the waves into a brightness that seemed neither sea nor sky. She opened her eyes and found herself surrounded by a gentle glow, the currents of wind moving through her as if the air itself welcomed her. She realized she had not vanished, not as foam, but transformed. A spirit of the wind, one of the daughters of the air. Her hair floated freely, her body untethered, and though she no longer had a tail, she felt the freedom of a world not bound by water or land. She hovered above the ocean, watching the palace, the prince, and the wedding preparations below. The humans continued their lives unaware of her transformation, yet she felt no sadness, only a quiet grace and a sense of purpose. The sea witch's bargain had ended, and though she had not gained an immortal soul through the love of the prince, she had earned a different path. Through her deeds, through her care and devotion, through the choices she had made, she had achieved a new kind of existence, one that allowed her to continue observing, helping, and shaping the world in ways she had only begun to imagine. The Little Mermaid learned that the daughters of the air existed to guide, watch, and nurture. They could drift through human towns, forests, and seas, unseen but present, offering small blessings and quiet influence. She discovered that in this form, her actions carried weight, her compassion could touch lives, and her spirit could grow. Each act of kindness, each moment of gentle intervention brought her closer to the possibility of a soul, a reward for her courage and virtue rather than her romantic fulfillment. As the day broke fully, she felt the warmth of the sun upon her face, the freedom of the wind beneath her arms, and the strength that came from choice and sacrifice. She hovered over the ocean, where the waves still carried the echoes of her past life. But she was no longer bound by the pain of legs that cut like knives or the silence of a stolen voice. She could move as she pleased, travel as she wished, and observe the world with a perspective both human and mermaid, both bound and free. The prince and his bride were married, their joy bright and unbroken, while the Little Mermaid watched from above, feeling no bitterness, only a soft ache and the quiet satisfaction of a love expressed not in possession but in sacrifice. She had chosen the life of integrity and compassion over selfish desire, and in that choice she had discovered a power greater than the sea witch's magic, a life freer than even the depths of the ocean could offer. Time passed, and she learned to move among the daughters of the air, drifting over fields, forests, and waves, her presence unseen yet subtly influencing the world. She could feel the happiness she nurtured, the comfort she offered to those in need, and the small transformations she facilitated in the hearts of humans. Though she remained a spirit, her essence retained the gentleness and beauty of the Little Mermaid who had once gazed longingly at the surface, dreaming of light, warmth, and love. Each night she hovered above the waves, looking toward the palace, remembering the prince, the wedding, and the life she had left behind. The memories were neither bitter nor sorrowful, but tender and instructive, a reminder of the path she had chosen and the strength she had gained. She realized that love could exist in forms other than possession or fulfillment, that sacrifice could bring not despair, but transcendence, and that a life lived with courage, devotion, and kindness could lead to a kind of immortality even beyond the soul she sought. The daughters of the air taught her that the world, both land and sea, was full of unseen currents and hidden forces, of quiet opportunities to act, to help, and to guide. She drifted among them, learning their ways, discovering the influence of her own choices, and growing in wisdom and spirit. Her voice, though gone, was replaced by action. Her steps, once painful, were now the effortless flight of a wind and light. The sea below her shimmered in the morning sun, and the world above glimmered with life, each wave, tree, and creature carrying the subtle imprint of her presence. In the end, the Little Mermaid had become something neither human nor fully mermaid, a being who could witness both worlds, who could act with freedom, and who had earned the chance to grow toward something greater. She rose with the wind, her heart filled with purpose, her spirit quiet yet strong, and her gaze turned toward the horizon, where sky and sea met. She had faced love, sacrifice, and transformation, and in doing so had discovered a life larger and more enduring than she had ever imagined. And so the Little Mermaid, once bound to the depths, once silent and limited by her sacrifice, became a daughter of the air, a spirit of grace and quiet power. She drifted above the waves, watching, guiding and learning, carrying within her the courage, devotion and hope that had brought her to this new existence. Though she had not gained an immortal soul through the love of the prince, she had found a different path, a path of freedom, purpose, and the chance to earn a soul through goodness and care. And in that freedom, she discovered the true measure of her own heart. Her journey, begun in the coral gardens of the sea, had led her to heights unimaginable, transforming her grief and longing into a life of quiet strength, patience, and benevolence. The world, both above and below, would continue to move and change, yet she would remain a watchful spirit, a silent guide, a daughter of the air. And in that role, she found a sense of completion and hope that no foam of the sea or silence of the voice could ever have offered alone. The Little Mermaid story, from the depths of the ocean to the heights of the wind, had reached its end, not in despair, but in transformation, a testament to courage, sacrifice, and the enduring power of a heart that chooses goodness above all.